Okay, welcome to Lit Matters. This video is called Macbeth in Context, a two-part video going to look at 10 key contextual points that could help strengthen your exam responses or essays where you have some marks available for your contextual knowledge. So, let's get on with it. Defer no time, delays have dangerous ends. Now, the first thing to say with context and with the use of social, historical, or cultural context is don't ever bolt it on. Never add it to the end, all in one job lot in one paragraph, because that won't get you many marks. That won't give off a sense that you have a sound historical knowledge which is informing your understanding and appreciation of the text. What you need to do is be constantly referring to it and constantly showing how your insight and your knowledge enhances your understanding of what Shakespeare is up to. So this is the running order. There's going to be 10 of these aspects of context that I think are worth looking at. The first video is going to cover the first 5 and the second 5. So on we go. Firstly, Elizabethan witchcraft in context of demonology specifically. Now, if any Shakespeare play is written with a particular audience in mind, then it is Macbeth, and it's with James I of England, James VI of Scotland, as he was brought down to England after the death of Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen who died without an heir. And it's very much with him in mind. Shakespeare has been playing to the gallery, has been a favourite of Queen Elizabeth, and his plays have been performed at court and so on, and he needs the same patron of James I, and it's a dangerous time if James doesn't like his plays. Can off with his head if he so desires. So he's got to play to that gallery specifically, and James is very interested in the supernatural, and in fact so much so he writes a book, Demonology, in 1599, which was a sort of pamphlet analysing whether there was any power in the supernatural, whether the forces of darkness did exist, and whether they could control the lives and interfere and affect the lives of men and women in the real world. And fear of witchcraft was a very strong thing. It was very real. You have to understand when writing about these essays that even though you don't believe in witches, and hopefully you don't, that the Elizabethan audience may very well have done. And so demonology was an attempt by James I to ascertain whether there was any power that the supernatural held over people, but the audience would be fairly convinced in many cases that it could. So what did they actually think witches could do? Well, all of these they believed that the witches were the servants of the devil. So there's numerous references in Macbeth to the witches being agents of the devil or being closely connected to him, that they could murder farmers' livestock. It was an easy explanation. If you were a farmer and had your hen house savage one night, you could blame it on the witches, or perhaps a wolf or a fox might have eaten half your herd of livestock. Oh well, that was witches. What done it? They believe witches could also control the wind and the weather. In Act 1, Scene 3, one of the witches says to the other one that she'll give her a bit of a wind to blow her off to Syria, to Aleppo, to go and wreak havoc with this rump-fed Runyon's husband. People believe that they could be physically harmed by witches, and that witches were also likely responsible for plagues, and that they could fly and move across impossible distances very, very quickly. So they did have these very real, immense powers for many in the Elizabethan audience. So showing an understanding of that, and perhaps an appreciation of the excitement or the tension that the audience would receive these witchy scenes, is particularly important. Right, number 3, of course, is it was a patriarchal society. It still is a patriarchal society, as you will have seen from recent events such as the Me Too campaign, or the exposing of where there is a gap in the gender gap in terms of pay equality in 2018 Britain, but even more so in Elizabethan and Jacobean times. And so referring it to as a patriarchal society is particularly important. Women would have been denied an education, and would have been limited in their life chances and their opportunities. And so I think that makes Lady Macbeth's speeches and her attitude even more impressive, even more formidable, and the extent to which she dominates not just her husband but other characters in the play with her confidence, and with her plans and plotting is sort of particularly significant in the light of the fact that this was a very patriarchal society. And in fact, here in her famous speech, if you want a quotation to demonstrate that, well, it's in her famous "Unsex Me Here" speech, where "Fill me from the crown to the toe top, full of direst cruelty." It's nothing to do with sexual intercourse, sadly. It's everything to do with her not wanting to be a woman in this instance, and not wanting to be associated with perhaps the gentle nature and femininity or maternal instinct. She wants to be a man, and or at least wants to have the power and the force and the ruthlessness that was associated with manhood, or at least she associates with manhood at that time. Number 4 is the rivalry between the Catholics and the Protestants, which had raged for the best part of a century up to this point. Here is, I won't read all of this, but another case in point where a Catholic would-be assassin tried to take out Queen Elizabeth and was caught, and he was sent off to the Tower of London. Called Chidiock Titchbourne. Worth looking up his poem he writes in the Tower of London called Titchbourne's Elegy, an elegy to his own life, where he sort of talks about his race being run, and you'll find the reason of his execution in his birth, the fact that he was born a Catholic, and the particularly nasty end was dished out to anyone who would challenge the monarchy, or even have the courage to try an assassination attempt. And thanks to King Henry VIII's libido and the fact that he married 6 different women and impregnated 3 of them, his offspring were both Catholic and Protestant, which meant that the English throne, the English crown, passed or switched between the two sides, with lots of murder and bloodshed and revenge exacted by both sides over from the reign of Bloody Mary and into Queen Elizabeth. And this would involve, if you were caught doing this, then you could expect a particularly grisly, gruesome end, hung, drawn and quartered, often disemboweled and emasculated. Lovely. If you don't know what emasculation involves in this context, perhaps stick it in Google Image. Not on your school computer though. Right, so the 5th one is Guy Fawkes and a changing monarch, and the context there for James I. The play Macbeth is in some ways a warning of the threat of assassination. There are many attempts at regicide in the play Macbeth. At first you've got Macdonald, the traitor, teaming up with the original Thane of Cawdor and Swano of Norway to attack King Duncan, and then you've got Macbeth's attempt on the life of King Duncan, which is rather more successful, and then you've also got Malcolm's attempt to take back the throne from Macbeth. So there's this constant change in monarch, or at least constant threats to a change in monarch, and Shakespeare is perhaps warning James I that where some of his threats might come from. Very famously, of course, is the Guy Fawkes, the gunpowder plot in 1605, which is very, very relevant in terms of Macbeth. Macbeth's written some point between 1603 and 1606, and Guy Fawkes was a Catholic who had his family murdered and tortured because of their religion by the Protestant power under Queen Elizabeth. And then when James I came down, he too was Catholic, but wanted to squash some of the decades-long tit-for-tat revenges, and wanted a degree of peace. Now Guy Fawkes saw him as a sellout, saw him as a traitor to their faith and to their religion, and that's why he wanted to take him out. So I think Shakespeare is perhaps warning James I that threats to your power can come from a number of different angles, not just the most obvious and the most immediate. Right, another 5 coming in the next video, so be sure to click on that.
Pressure.